Also here, you often talk about the term the ecological age. What does that mean? Describe the idea to us.
Yes, the idea of the ecological age is basically, first of all, an understanding of economics. We basically now concede that the current model of GDP, as we call it, GDP really is a measure of the use of non-renewable resources. And the more resources we use, the higher is GDP. And we think we're doing well if we build GDP that way. Actually, of course, it's a road to ruin because we'll run out of those resources and they'll get very expensive. So the idea is to shift to an economic model that uses renewable resources really efficiently. So then growth in the ecological economics is growth in the efficiency of using renewables and closing resource loops. So that transition is an economic transition as well as a physical one. And right now we have a massive growth in resource-efficient goods and services for cities, which of course is moving us that way quite quickly. So that's one thing. The second thing is actually the way we live on the planet physically, and that means cities being fashioned so we can use the biomimicry principles, gathering, using energy and waste and so on in efficient ways. And then the third thing in the ecological age is the Human Development Index. The Millennium Development Goals in the world set levels of improving social conditions, and therefore we say the ecological age is meeting those Human Development Index targets by actually freeing ourselves up from the waste of resource use and putting that money into human development and accelerating human development in the developing world through this transition, creating new goods, new services, using local resources. So it's a combination of sort of three things: reducing carbon emissions, lowering the ecological footprint of the way we live, and raising human development. And the sort of target is to try and move the world to that position by 2050, which is part of the objective of reducing emissions to stabilize the Earth's temperature increase.
What would be the critical changes we will need to do to move towards the ecological age? Yeah. What are governments across the world, what do we need to fundamentally change about the way we do things to, transition towards the ecological age?
It needs really to be a partnership between governments, the private sector, communities and NGOs. In the end, everyone has to recognize the vision of where we want to go and to work together to get there. The private sector needs some certainty of this direction, and therefore it's very important for governments to set policies which create a stable environment in which the private sector can invest in this new paradigm. So, for example, it's very important that governments set conditions where renewable energy and reusing waste and materials is attractive from their point of view. So Germany introduced legislation for renewables to be connected to the grid that meant you could get a good commercial price for your renewables, which meant therefore there was an acceleration of the take-up of renewables in Germany. That's now been taken up in 50 countries around the world, including China. And this is something, for example, that India should do to encourage that transition. There are other ideas like setting standards for buildings and design of infrastructure, of not encouraging building roads, but encouraging high-speed railways, walking and cycling in cities, the use of electric cars, things like emissions regulations in cities to mean you can't drive polluting vehicles around cities. You have to drive clean vehicles. There are lots of things governments can do. But once those conditions are established, then the private sector and communities can then work together to make that happen.
Are there any countries in the world that are on the path to the ecological age today?
I mean, the most high-profile one, and saying on the road is perhaps overstating it, but China has said, Hu Jintao in his speech at the 17th Party Congress in October last year, said, we are going to take China to the ecological age. He stated that. They have created something called the circular economy law, which is encouraging manufacturing companies to recycle their products and systems and materials. They've put in place this renewable energy law. They're changing their planning regulations to require environmentally sensitive development to happen. But they have recognized it's a very big challenge. There needs to be lots of training and education at city, regional levels, and the technical delivery, architects, engineers, planners need to be trained in the new system. So at the moment they're planning to do demonstrator projects, but even those are really quite challenging to deliver on the ground. So I think it will take a little while. Other countries, there are a number of European countries that are quite advanced. Denmark, Sweden, Germany are moving this way, and there are good examples of this around Europe. But also in South America, you've got certain cities. Curitiba in Brazil is a good example. Bogota is another good example, where the mayors are inspirational in driving this idea of the ecological age development. So there are some good examples.
Can we retrofit and revive existing world cities like London, New York or Mumbai into being more sustainable?
One of the first and important things is that planning, land use planning, is really fundamental. And the first thing to do is to look at the density of cities. Compact mixed-use hubs within the communities change the way streets are used, so they're more used for walking and cycling with public transport, so people can actually use cars less. And then the final thing is putting in things like electric cars and low emission vehicles to reduce pollution. Also, insulating buildings and improving their energy performance reduces demand. Final thing, green roofs, food production, trees in the streets, cooling the place down so that the overall energy is less.
It was about how important it is to link urban and rural environments.
One of the really important things that we've lost is the industrial model of development. We actually lifted the economics and the living conditions for people by them moving to the city. So people who moved to the city had a higher economic wealth, but what happened is the rural environment then collapsed and actually the economy went down. And we then use resources more inefficiently because we still need food. We still need to use every piece of land on Earth very efficiently. So in the ecological age model, what we need to do is to connect those two things, lift the rural economy at the same time as the urban economy. And one way to do that is to, if we take water as an example, we have to have water in the city, hopefully using it efficiently. If we then take the wastewater and we treat that, we then get grey water. We can use that grey water to irrigate the farmland between the urban developments and provide a reliable source of water for growing food. In many places with climate change, that isn't there anymore. And by doing that, you can provide a reliable source of water from the urban economy, which the farmers then get to lift their economic performance and their productivity. And then the waste stream from the city can provide the nutrients and minerals to go back into the supply chain, into the food for the farmers as compost, which can then again make their growing more productive. So by linking these things together, one can actually lift both together and then the whole economy is better.